As documentary filmmakers, most of us spend the majority of our time outside the studio, and traveling is almost a requirement for the job. We also need to shoot a lot of interviews, and just because we're not working with big Hollywood grip departments, we still want our stuff to look good. That means lights, modifiers, flags, stands, all sorts of grip equipment, none of which are known for being very portable. I mean, the average C-stand weighs over 20 pounds, I think, and instead of 3 like the ones Matthew sells, is way over the limit for normal airline baggage restrictions. So for those of us working with small teams and tight budgets, but who still want high-end cinematic results, we need to get creative with the gear we travel with. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. 5 pieces of grip equipment that I travel with on almost every run and gun documentary shoot that really help me shape and control lighting on the road. My entire setup will fit into a single large duffel bag that's airline friendly. And while it might be a little bit more stripped down than you'd find on a big set, you'll still get some great results. And as an added bonus, at the end, I'll tell you what this thing is and how it saved my butt on shoots across 3 different continents. All right, let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Luke Forsyth, and on this channel, I teach the skills I've learned over 10 years working as a documentary filmmaker and photographer. If you're into that kind of thing, make sure to hit the subscribe button because I've got new videos coming out every Wednesday. Okay. So if you're getting into documentary filmmaking, you're probably never gonna have the kind of control that a Hollywood DP might with a small army of people working for them on a soundstage. You're gonna have to go out into the real world, and for the most part, you'll be trying to capture real life moments as they happen, rather than creating scenes like they do in the movies. That's one of my favorite parts of the job, and I wouldn't change it for anything. But at the same time, I still wanna be able to control light from time to time, to augment what the real world offers, especially when you're shooting interviews. And for that, you need grip gear. For anyone who isn't familiar with the term, grip equipment basically means all the tools that support the camera and lights. This means stands, frames for diffusion, overhead rigs, dollies, tracks, jibs, a bunch of other things that aren't really the camera or the lights themselves. On a big film set, there are dedicated people called, surprise, surprise, grips, who handle all this stuff, and they often have dedicated trucks just to get everything to set. As documentary shooters, we're not gonna have all this stuff at our disposal, and we're probably gonna have to carry most of it ourselves. So we'll need to make trade-offs if we wanna keep the space and weight to a manageable level. But that doesn't mean you can't still get some really solid results. So let's not waste any time and get right into my personal favorite grip stuff to travel with. Before you get into any of the other things, the first thing you'll have to figure out is what kind of stand you're gonna use to support everything. On a set, the standard stand is the C-stand, and for good reason. C-stands are super versatile, they can hold a lot of weight, and they're really stable if you set them upright. The problem is that they're made of solid metal and weigh a ton. I've worked on a few really big budget shoots where we've had multiple vans to carry gear, and it's been possible to bring heavy cases of C-stands, but that's pretty unusual. Most of the time I have to make do with much smaller stands, which are way lighter, but can't hold as much weight. It's always going to be a trade-off between load limit and weight, but for me, the stand that provides the best are the Modifiers reverse stands. These things weigh about 3 pounds each, but they hold up to 11 pounds, meaning I can get a large key light like a Joker or an Aperture 300D or something similar with the softbox with no problem. And that's about the heaviest light I'm ever really likely to travel with. They're called reverse stands because they fold back on themselves like this, which makes them shorter and easier to transport. I have 4 of them, I think, and they come with me on almost every shoot. And in most of my interview setups, I end up using them all. They're about $80 each, and no matter what abuse I seem to put on them, they just don't seem to break. The folding leg design also means that these legs here at the bottom are a lot longer than the average stand, which makes them a lot more stable, so you don't have to worry about them tipping over as much. You can definitely find cheaper ones out there, but they can't hold nearly as much weight, and they tend to have tiny little legs that'll fall over in a light breeze, and I really just don't feel comfortable putting like big light fixtures on them. For me, these stands are the best value to quality ratio out there when it comes to travel gear, and they should last you a really long time. But one thing that makes C-stands so useful are those grip heads that come with them. These arm and head combos allow you to do so many more things than mount a light, and they're one of the main reasons why C-stands are so useful. There are so many different ways you can use a C-stand, and it would take an entire video just to scratch the surface, so rather than half-ass it, I'll just link to a video from the Grip Tips YouTube channel in the description. Like I already mentioned, these things are way too heavy for most of my shoots, and so I had to find an alternative. Luckily, the same company that makes those reverse stands, Modifiers, is probably the industry leader for C-stands, and they also make a super lightweight version of those grip heads that they call the mini grip mounting kit. The kit comes with 2 of these mini grip heads, 2 of these clamps, and 2 of these lightweight arms. They save a lot of weight by making everything out of a lightweight plastic rather than solid metal, which would normally make me a little bit nervous about build quality, but I've had this kit for about 5 years now and not a single piece has broken. And the total weight of everything in this kit is just under 4 pounds, which makes it really easy to shove in a bag. There are so many ways to put this kit to use, like gripping onto flags or hanging china balls from this part or latching onto boom poles. Pretty much anything you can do with a normal grip head, just in a smaller package. The C47 YouTube channel has a pretty good in-depth overview of this kit and some of the things you can do with it. So instead of making this video way too long, I'll just link to that video in the description as well, so you can check it out. The bottom line is that even though this isn't quite as beefy as a normal metal set of grip heads and clamps, the weight savings mean you can actually bring this stuff with you, which in dock shooting makes all the difference. The clamps are especially useful and allow you to mount to unusual places, like clamping onto the bottom of desks or walls. And the base kit only comes with 2 of them. I'd probably recommend adding 2 more clamps to that because I use them all the time for things like mics and boom poles and all sorts of stuff. They're incredibly useful. So Matthews, if anyone's watching, maybe consider adding 2 more of these to the stock kit.
Thank you.
The one problem you have to watch out for when you start extending off of your lightweight stands using the grip kit is that when you change the center of balance, you do run the risk of the stands tipping over and breaking your light, or even falling on your interview subject. On a normal film set, you'd probably just drop a sandbag on the leg of your stand to keep everything stable, but it's not really practical to be checking 20-pound bags of sand on an international flight. You could always just put backpacks or pelican cases on the legs to keep it weighted down, and that works okay most of the time, but they can slip off and it's just kind of a janky solution. Then a few years ago, I heard about a solution that seemed way too simple for me not to have heard of it before. Water bags. I've mentioned these water bags on the channel before, but I can't stress how fantastic these things are, and I'm really surprised they're not more common. It's really just a heavy-duty water bladder inside of this really tough bag with a couple straps on it so you can hang it off your stands. You just fill the bag up from a river or lake or tap or whatever, and when you're done with it, you just dump it out. When these are empty, they really weigh almost nothing, and you can roll them or fold them or just cram them into another bag for transport. At $45 each, they're not super cheap, but they solve a very real problem for me, and the build quality is top notch, so I'd say they're worth it. Mine just usually lay flat at the bottom of a big duffel bag, and they don't take up much space, and on the occasions I've needed them, they've been a real lifesaver. Okay, so your stands are stable, you've got grip heads and clamps to hold whatever you need, but other than lights and mics, what else would you maybe want to make an interview setup look great? Hollywood DPs use a crazy assortment of light modifiers to soften, diffuse, and block light on set. And even though us doc filmmakers need to pare down the kit a little, we can still use some of the same techniques to get great results. But carrying bulky frames and huge pieces of cloth really isn't practical when you're on the road. And yet again, it's going to be Matthews with the best solution. These are called road rags, and inside this folding bag there are 2 frames which work pretty much like tent poles. There's 2 scrims for cutting light, 1 solid flag, and a silk. When you set them up, they're about 2 feet by 3 feet wide, which is quite a bit smaller than you normally see on a big set, but you can still do a lot with them. I use the silk a lot as a bounce or to soften overhead light or as a diffuser for bigger lights, and I use the flag all the time to get a little bit of negative fill on someone's face or block out a window or whatever. It's not the same as having a 12 by 12 or 20 by 20 frame flying over your set, but as always, you need to make these compromises if you want to take this stuff on the road. And considering the whole thing folds down into this pretty small package, it's a great solution that can really help to bump up your production value. I personally added a second silk to the kit, and I've been thinking about getting a 3rd frame as well, but the standard set will go a long way. With the mini grip kit, you can get these things into a ton of different positions and really start shaping light instead of just dealing with whatever's there. There's not a lot out there on YouTube about this kit, but I'll link to an older review video from YouTube OG Dave Dugdale if you want to learn a little bit more about them. If you need something to cover a bigger source than the road rags can handle, I also carry a cheap Amazon shower curtain and a big sheet of duvetine. Duvetine is basically fancy light absorbing cloth, but you can also just get a piece of felt from your local fabric store if you want to save money. With a shower curtain and a piece of duvetine, you can either soften or block out big windows that the smaller road rags can't, and I keep a piece of each in my grip bag. The only challenge with these things is that you have to figure out how to secure them in place, and sometimes gaffer tape just isn't strong enough. And that brings me to the last piece of travel grip gear I'd recommend most dock shooters keep in their kit, and those are clamps, or A-clamps, or spring clamps. These are a different type of clamp than come with the Matthews mini grip kit, and they use springs instead of a screw down system to keep pressure on whatever you're clamping. These clamps aren't anything special, and you can get them off the internet or from most hardware stores, but it's amazing how useful they can be. I keep a few different sizes in my kit bag, from these big heavy duty ones to much smaller ones, and I use them all the time. Beyond just hanging big pieces of cloth, they can also help keep cables off the ground or hold gels in front of lights, or even put small lights in weird places. They're really cheap, and so throwing a few different kinds in your bag is a no-brainer. Trust me, you'll find a way to use them. And that's it. With those 5 items, you can get some amazing results and go from having to deal with whatever natural light you find to shaping and controlling light to get a more intentional and specific look on your next shoot. I use this stuff most often when doing interviews, which is a huge part of filming documentaries, but they can also be super handy for just sneaking in an extra mic or small light into a verite scene as well. Plus, you'll look like a pro when you're pulling all these things out of your bag. And in the end, isn't that the most important thing of all?
Of course. Of course.
Oh, and I almost forgot about my possibly favorite piece of travel gear of all time, this thing. Now, imagine you've spent 2 hours setting up all this stuff and you have your interview location looking great. You're almost ready to go when you realize there's nowhere for the director or whoever else is doing the interview to sit. Or maybe you're in a remote location and there are no chairs for your subject to sit on. That's when you whip out this guy and save the day. This is a collapsible and adjustable stool that holds up to 260 pounds. The adjustable height means you can match the eye line with your interview subject pretty easily, and then when you're done, you just collapse the whole thing. Throw it into a bag. It might seem silly, but finding a seat without a big back in a remote location can be a real challenge, and I've come out looking like a hero on more than one occasion for having this thing around. Toss one of these into your grip bag, and you'll be truly prepared to set up any interview, no matter how little stuff you have on hand when you get to the location. Super nerdy, I know, but I absolutely love this thing. Getting some basic grip equipment in your kit will help you level up your game, and every dock shooter can benefit from having these basic tools. I take all of these things on pretty much every shoot, and it's rare that I don't use them. Even better, grip gear doesn't go out of date like most cameras do, so once you have a good setup, you can keep it for a long time to come. Hope you guys found that video helpful, and if you did, think about subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. And if you did like that one, maybe check out this other video I made about gear I use to film in harsh environments. See ya.